quarter. The French went on a 16-2 run to win the first game of the group stage, snapping the Americans' 25-game Olympic winning streak. Newly crowned NBA champ Drew Holiday, he led the way with 18 points. Drew Holiday, here's his reaction to the loss.
We have a team that, our full team, this is the first time we played together. So a lot of adversity, and I feel like this is just something that we do a lot, and we'll accomplish this too, just like we've accomplished everything before. But we're smart players, great character, and we'll figure it out these next two.
We welcome in our NBA reporter, Brian Windhorst, who joins us now from Tokyo. And Brian, listen, Drew makes very good points there. They just came together. Timing is certainly not helping them. People could say we're overreacting still, though, but it is the first time the American men have lost a game at the Olympics since 2004 in Athens. It is a big deal. So what's the biggest problem to come out of that loss?
Well, Sage, as you mentioned, 7 points up with 4 minutes to play. That is a game that the Americans must close. And certainly they have challenges, but their talent level is unmatched in this tournament. You know, Kevin Durant was in foul trouble in this game, and that definitely was an issue. But when Durant went to the bench, they brought in Jason Tatum, an All-NBA player. And so part of the issue that we're seeing here is, yes, there's cohesion and chemistry issues. Yes, there's lack of togetherness, and they haven't had the reps. We don't have guys who are not rising to the occasion. We have a lot of talent on this team. I have to say, they have lost 5 of their last 8 games dating to the 2019 World Cup. There's a lot of excuses. Many of them are legit, but there's no excuse for that performance, and they're going to have to start playing better individually immediately.
Yeah, so I want to build off that, because it's one thing to get beat up in some exhibition games, which were still concerning, but then there's this. And when you say guys really aren't all in, why?
Well, I just think it's a comfort level issue. And, Greg Popovich has changed the way he's constructed the roster from 2019 to 2021. He went through a game plan yesterday where he started with basically 2 of his big men, Draymond Green and Bam Adebayo, in the starting lineup. And I understand why he's done that. It makes, strategy sense, but it's not working. And you can see the players are not comfortable. And the other thing Greg Popovich is doing is he really wants them to play international style, frankly, San Antonio Spurs style basketball, where you share the ball, move the ball around the perimeter. And that is a beautiful game. It is also something that takes a long time to develop. And when you see guys like Damian Lillard passing up open shots in close games in the fourth quarter, which is not who Damian Lillard is and never is, you can tell that they're not comfortable. So steps need to be taken for them to get back to who they are, and that's got to begin against Iran on Wednesday.
And again, the time issue is totally legitimate. The finals just ended, playoffs just ended, everything backed up because of COVID. It doesn't matter now, though. We're less than 2 days away from their next game, so they got to move on. It's against Iran. What do the next couple of days look like for Team USA?
Well, they didn't have a practice today in Tokyo, so they'll practice tomorrow. They just needed some rest. But here's the thing. They still have control of their destiny. Nothing is lost per se. If they win the next 2 games this week, they will advance to the medal round. But I have to say, Sage, they need to not only play well against Iran, but they need to kind of blow them out. And the reason is because they now are facing a situation where point differential is going to matter. They're going to be out of position. The Czech Republic is on Saturday, and I'd like to tell you that they'll win that game and be fine, but the way this team is playing right now, I can't assume a win over a team like the Czech Republic. And so they need to play well against Iran and run the score up to give themselves a cushion, because they might end up needing those points as they try to move into the next round.
That's the thing. It's not just wins and losses. It's point differential during these group stages. Brian Windhorst, man, this feels a lot different from the Dream Team days just a couple of years ago, doesn't it? Thank you for joining us. Get some sleep. It's middle of night in Tokyo there. Thank you for.
What are we expecting?
A lot of trade talk. I think if there's a name that is certain to be in play, already in play, that's the name. And I think the struggle for Philly is going to be, they're dealing him from a position of weakness after we all saw the playoffs. We all saw that he didn't shoot in the fourth quarter. We all saw the free throw shooting. And so this idea that they want an all-star in return for their all-star, I think they're going to have trouble finding an all-star who is both available and gettable without tossing in some picks and other stuff atop Ben Simmons. Obviously, they're going to wait out the Bradley Beal thing like everybody else, but they'll have a lot of competition for a player like that.
Well, let's talk about that since you mentioned it, and we'll tie them together if they deserve to be tied together. What are we expecting as far as Bradley Beal is concerned?
I don't really know. And, there were all these reports over the weekend about how Bradley Beal is contemplating his future and this and that. Really, that's just a fancy way of restating the status quo. Bradley Beal, and like any other superstar in a situation that isn't perfect, is sort of constantly contemplating his future. And will he request a trade in the next 72 hours? I really don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. I think it's 50-50, maybe something like that. But we are running short on time at this point because if draft equity is involved, the Wizards are obviously going to want to control those picks if draft equity in this draft is involved. So the closer we get, I think the more likely it is that it's the status quo remains, but there's still time.
To be clear, for anyone who didn't see it, there were reports out there that Beal was going to request/demand a trade at the beginning of this week, and there's, to your point, there's a lot of uncertainty as to how he will. So when you said Philly was going to wait out Bradley Beal, what did you mean by that? How were those two things connected?
Well, I just think Philly would be, like I said, that I think they'd have trouble finding an available all-star caliber player for Ben Simmons. I think Bradley Beal would be one of those players that they would try to get involved with. I don't know if Washington is interested in Ben Simmons. I'm sure Washington would say that, hey, Ben Simmons is great. We watched the playoffs too. We'd like a first-round pick. We would like Tyrese Maxey. We'd like swap rights. We'd like a whole lot of other stuff. So it would be a complicated conversation.
Greeny and Zach Lowe, who is with us here, the Low Post podcast and everything else. He's on the Goodyear hotline, helping you discover the road ahead. Goodyear, more driven. I happened to be in the D.C. area this weekend, so I was watching and listening to some of the local conversation, and there's a lot of speculation as to how tied together the Beal situation and the Russell Westbrook situation are. So I'll just give you the floor on that. What can you tell me about Russell Westbrook?
I think it's very similar to the James Harden Russell Westbrook situation, where they kind of both saw the writing on the wall at the same time and kind of who can get out first kind of deal. And I think that's not atypical. I mean, I think that this discussion, let me be clear, is I think far into the future, like minimum months into the future, but it's almost similar in Portland with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. If you're going to trade one for just rebuilding stuff, you might as well just trade them both for rebuilding stuff, because the other one who sticks around is going to say, wait a second, you just traded my co-star for a bunch of rebuilding stuff. That doesn't really make sense. So I don't think that's atypical that if one is traded, both would be traded. But trading Russ ain't easy, and Russ has been able to be traded only for sort of other albatross-type contracts, or in Chris Paul's case, what people wrongly conceived as an albatross-type contract.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Paul. Again, Greeny and Zach Lowe. There's so much here. Because everyone's waiting to see what the Lakers will do. And I'm hearing Chris Paul's name connected to that, and I'm hearing Russell Westbrook's name connected to that. What are you hearing, and what are your expectations?
I don't expect either of those players to end up with the Lakers, but you can't rule it out because they are the Lakers, and I think they'd be willing to trade almost everything they have available to trade to get somebody of that caliber. It's just they just don't have very much to trade. Even Dennis Schroeder is a free agent, so they'd have to sign and trade him. That brings up all sorts of complications. I just haven't heard a realistic deal, particularly for Paul, who has a lot of value coming off his second-team All-NBA season, right? Like, we all remember these last 3 or 4 games of the finals where he was just sort of good by his standards, not great, but he had a great, great season. I haven't seen a Lakers package that's realistic. Russ is a different story because I just don't think he has a lot of trade value. I think the Lakers package, whatever they could cobble, would get them in that conversation.
All right. And so just to sort of put a ribbon on the Lakers of it all, is it your expectation that they will do something big? Like they sat and watched this thing play out, the injury to Anthony Davis and everything else. Would you expect in the next 4 days the Lakers to do something monumental?
No, I'd say medium size. I'd say Schroeder size, really. I mean, and see what they can get for that. But that was the idea with Dennis Schroeder. He's going to be the third guy. He's going to be the point guard to take some of the load off LeBron and run the offense. And the problem is he didn't shoot it well enough. So they'd love to get somebody like Kyle Lowry. That's sort of the perfect third cog for them. Kyle Lowry wants a lot of money. I'm not sure how the Lakers get to that number and give Toronto an assign and trade whatever Toronto would want. So I think it's going to be a medium size. They will do something because, look, LeBron's going to be 37. Like, if you have 37-year-old LeBron on your team, you got to try to win every single year. So they're going to do something, but I would bet on medium.
Okay, Zach Lowe with me here. And then that brings us to a name we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Damian Lillard. And you touched on it with C.J. McCollum. But Lillard, and he's busy right now with Team USA. And Zach, just a few minutes ago, I went through their loss to France. They have some business to take care of before he and they can start worrying about their NBA next step. But clearly that's out there, and the Lillard thing has been out there through much of this offseason. What's going on with him?
The best intel we have now is this is not this offseason thing. And that the Blazers will have this season, at least up until the trade deadline, to prove to him, however they might be able to do it, that they can build the kind of team that he wants built around him. Now, they have a lot of obstacles to doing that. Their contract situation, their trade asset situation is a little rough. But I don't think as of now, like, this could all change. He's around guys in Team USA. Like, the NBA changes fast. But as of now, I would expect Dame to start the season with the Blazers, which really means the trade deadline, unless something goes completely haywire, is when you'd first see real noise again.
Again, Zach Lowe here. The Low Post podcast is the place to get all of this insight and more, except when we're lucky enough to grab him here. A couple of other big names that are out there. Kawhi Leonard, his future, depending upon his state of mind, can be in some question. What should everybody be thinking about when it comes to Kawhi right now?
I'd put it like this. I've heard nothing that I would consider credible or actionable that he's going to leave the Clippers. That doesn't mean that he's going to 100% lock to stay with the Clippers. I would bet heavily on him staying with the Clippers as of now, because whatever I've heard has been conjecture, smoke, nothing that checks out on phone call number 2, 3, and 4. So I would be pretty confident he's staying with the Clippers.
Okay, and then let me circle it all the way back to the beginning of the conversation for the last question. We were talking about Ben Simmons, and that has been the primary name in all of this, dating back to the Sixers losing to Atlanta on their own home floor in a Game 7. Is it at a place now where they have to trade him, which is to say, you just brought up that teams may be hesitant to give up superstars in return. Is there a return to Philly for Simmons? Do they have to move him one way or the other?
I actually don't think they do. Now, I haven't talked to Ben Simmons, and I don't know his state of mind. Maybe he feels that they have to move him. There's no question the toothpaste is at least somewhat out of the tube, right? But I don't think they have to, just for this reason alone. There are other ways to upgrade their team and their guard rotation. You know, maybe they can get into the Kyle Lowry bidding. Maybe they can get it. And if you get a player that fits around Embiid and Simmons a little bit better than what they had, particularly a ball handler, you can talk yourself into, okay, we've papered over some of our weaknesses. Simmons might look better in this ecosystem. We can rebuild his trade value a little bit. See what happens with Lillard. See what happens in other situations. Something always goes haywire in the NBA. It's like clockwork. There's going to be some crazy situation. Someone else will become available. I think